Welcome to the Antiochus Roadshow. Today we're excited to be passing through Modi'in, located about halfway between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem on Highway 445 in central Israel. This modern town of 92,000 dates back to just 1985, when the International Jewish Sports Organization, Maccabee, started construction. It's also home to a well-known Reform synagogue, Yozma, which Kol Ami visited during one of their famous trips.
But the ancient town goes way back to before the Common Era. In fact, Modi'in was the hometown of none other than Mattathias, the revolutionary leader and father of the Maccabee brothers. The roadshow is here in Modi'in to discover Israel's hidden treasures. We have a sold-out crowd here at Modi'in's Cultural Auditorium, and they're pretty excited to see us.
Welcome to
Modi'in.
Happy Hanukkah.
One big find here today is a small clay statuette brought in by Ronit.
Let's bring in our first guest appraiser now.
Tell us about this statuette, Ronit.
Well, originally, my great-grandfather found it while he was digging a foundation. This was about, I think it was 1946. He was using an ordinary hand shovel and a pick. And the family story goes like this. When he came across the little figure in the limestone, he just threw it aside.
It doesn't show any sign of breakage.
No, it seems to be in good shape.
This has been in your family ever since then?
Yes, my grandmother kept it in her china cabinet. And when I got married, she gave it to me. She said it was good luck.
This little fellow is made of terracotta. We'll never know the identity of the artist, but he, or more likely she, almost certainly lived in the Parthian kingdom during the Hellenistic period, the 3 centuries before the Common Era. A true antique. The statue is about 10 inches high, and it's a man in simple clothing, sporting a full beard. Notice the detail in his clothing, and particularly the length of his beard, so typical of that time and of the Parthians.
Hold up, rewind. Parthian kingdom? What's that?
The Parthians were a huge Iranian empire of that time, and the western reaches of that kingdom cover what used to be Syria. The big question is, how did it come to be in central Israel? And I think we can find the answer in the inscription on his back. Do you see these letters here?
I think I have to squint to see that. Hang on, let me just put on my reading glasses. Oh, yes, now I see it. Those are letters? They look like chicken scratching to me.
You see here, the alphabet is a type of Aramaic script, and the word clearly reads Epiphanes. This little man is praising the Seleucid Emperor Antiochus IV. He was the king who oppressed the Jews so cruelly that he prompted the Maccabean War.
This little statue? That's been on my dresser all this time?
All this time, it's been worshiping the bully of the Hanukkah story, the bad guy.
I can hardly believe it.
There's no way to tell 21 centuries later, but this statuette could have been on his way to the temple in Jerusalem. That's where Antiochus had placed a statue of Zeus, and no doubt plenty of smaller images to adore him. This little man's in excellent condition. Now, what would you guess it's worth?
Oh, I have no idea. Maybe 500 shekels?
I estimate that if you put this up for auction, of course, after showing it to the Israel Antiquities Authority, which is in charge of all ancient finds, it would sell for conservatively 20 to 25,000 shekels.
You gotta be kidding. Boy, that could buy me a new jacuzzi.
This is a national treasure, a real piece of history. I would urge you to contact the Israel Museum. You could get an incredible tax break for the donation of this little Parthian.
Thank you so much.
Parthian terracotta figure, 20 to 25,000 shekels.
What a find! I wonder what else our contestants on Antiochus Roadshow will bring our way this evening. Let's meet our next guest, Hanan.
My wife and I are in the scrap metal business.
Yes, that's right. We'll scrap any car. Toyota, Honda, Ford, Suzuki, you name it.
Leesa, dear, we have to tell the story. Anyway, one day a customer came in with a huge carton of stuff he wanted to unload. It was mostly broken pieces of machinery and tools, but this one seemed a little different.
It's a four-sided metal box with no top and no bottom. The sides have rows of holes with razor-sharp edges. And here we have a handle on top. Did your customer say what it was?
Only that his mother brought it here to Israel when she left Russia in about 1920.
It's very old and partially oxidized.
We thought maybe those are air holes. Maybe it's the frame of a box transporting small animals.
Or maybe a drain of some kind, like you put over a pipe at the bottom of a fountain.
Well, you see, the important clue about this item is actually what you told me about its origin. You said your customer's mother brought it over from Russia, so it was important enough to her that she didn't want to leave it behind. Something perhaps that she used a lot, maybe sentimental, not a fountain drain.
So a tool of some kind?
Yes, it is a tool. It's a kitchen tool, something the Russian emigre might have used very frequently, but especially on Hanukkah.
You mean you think this is for making latkes?
That's right. In those days, they didn't have food processors. In order to get those potatoes shredded to make latkes, people had to grate them by hand. You'd put this in a bowl, hold the handle with one hand, and scrape the potato against these holes. The shreds would pile up inside the grater.
Oh, well, that's very interesting. I guess a lot of work went into making latkes back then. What do you think this would be worth?
It's not in very good condition, I'm afraid. But if it were, I'd say 8 to 10 shekels at a street market.
Too bad. Back to the scrapyard. Bring your scrap metal down to Beersheba. We'll see you there.
Russian potato grater, 8 to 10 shekels.
The lengths people went to just to make latkes. Incredible. Let's meet our next appraiser and our next contestant, Ayala.
This looks very impressive. It's a Hellenistic era machera.
Isn't it?
No, not a sneeze. A machera. The sword you brought. How did you come by this?
I was on my way to my sister in Beit Haron, and I stopped by there about 5 years ago. The owner said he'd gotten it from an antiquities dealer before the Six-Day War. The trail stops there. It kind of goes cold.
It's either a small sword or a large knife, depending on how you want to look at it. A weapon like this would have been used by a Greek or Persian cavalryman. It's designed to cut rather than thrust. You see, it's single-bladed.
And very heavy. I can't get over that part.
Yes, it's got a lot of heft.
This not very sharp anymore, though.
No, although we can imagine its original polish. The metal has corroded a lot over the centuries. But the really interesting thing about this weapon is that it comes from Beit Haron. In 166 BCE, Judah Maccabee's forces battled against the Seleucid army in that very spot.
Really? In Beit Haron? Who knew? And also, who won that battle?
Who won? The Maccabees, of course. They knew their terrain very well and were able to outmaneuver the Seleucids and kill their commander, Saron. It was a decisive victory in the war for Jewish freedom. The rebels never looked back. In 165 BCE, the next year, they entered Jerusalem and rededicated the temple in the Jewish tradition, which is how we got the holiday of Hanukkah.
Wow. So it's possible the sword was used in the Battle of Haron against the Maccabees.
I think there's a better than 50% chance that the owner of this sword, if he survived, has chased into the Judean hills by the Maccabees, maybe even Judah himself.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
So, do you mind my asking how much you paid for it?
I was at a yard sale and I splurged. I didn't know what I was doing, but I thought it was interesting. I paid 75 shekels.
So knowing what you know now, how much would you guess this machera is worth?
I couldn't put a price on it. I'm really not sure, but maybe more than 75 shekels?
I agree. It would be hard, but for insurance purposes, this Hellenist era sword should be valued in the range of 100 to 120,000 shekels.
That much? I've got chills. I can't believe it. My chills are multiplying. It's amazing.
It's electrifying. Do you think you'll keep it or sell it?
That I need to think about. My heart says to hold on to it, but 100,000 shekels, that's a lot of money.
Either way, thanks for bringing it today.
You're welcome. See you soon.
Era machera, 100 to 120,000 shekels.
And the history used by one of the Greeks fighting against the Maccabees. I mean, an incredible story. Here's Danny, our next contestant.
I found this dreidel a year ago while I was cleaning out my grandparents' apartment in Teaneck, New Jersey. It's still in the box, but the cover is so worn down, I can only see a part of the word. I believe is Scharfstein.
Ah, yes, this is a dreidel, the toy most closely associated with the celebration of Hanukkah. But unlike the colorful plastic ones you see these days, this dreidel is made of lead. There's no date on the box, but I would estimate that this was made about the year 1935, definitely pre-war.
Any idea who Scharfstein is?
Quite likely Fanny and Asher Scharfstein, Russian Jews who immigrated to America in 1922. They were entrepreneurs, and after they arrived in New York, they decided they wanted to manufacture items for Jewish customers and hit upon the idea of making and selling lead dreidels. Asher found a tool and die maker who owned a dreidel casting machine, really. Fanny melted the lead and poured it into the dreidel-shaped mold. Pretty soon, she was turning out 75 dreidels an hour.
I've seen wooden dreidels and bronze and silver ones in artist galleries, but never a lead one other than this.
Yes, well, you know, in the early 20th century, this would have been the only kind of dreidel found in Jewish homes. Eventually, the plastic ones replaced the lead because we later learned that the lead is poisonous to young children if they eat it.
Maybe my Bubby and my Zadie brought this for my mom and her sisters.
Well, they were careful to keep it in the original box, which is good. It increases the value.
So what do you think the dreidel is worth, huh?
Well, the Scharfsteins sold these for 2 cents each in the 1930s. But today, with its original box and in its mint condition, you'll get about 50 shekels for it on eBay.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I can imagine my mom and her sisters playing dreidel together. Shin, put that one in.
American pre-war lead dreidel, 50 shekels.
Incredible how American Jewish artifacts even make their ways to Israel too. What do you know? Let's bring our last contestant on for the evening, Sarah.
So nice to meet you, Sarah. It seems you brought in an item which is very rarely seen, if ever. Tell us how you came by it.
I was conducting a tour for some foreign visitors outside the walls of the old city in Jerusalem. We were a few hundred yards from the new gate, and the tourists couldn't hear me because of the construction equipment. They're building an addition onto a hospital there. So I said to the tourists, let's get a little further from this. And when I turned to lead them away, my foot hit some rubble. When I bent down to see if my ankle was bleeding, I saw this. It was covered with dust.
You literally stumbled across it? Wow. You see, this is a clay jar, about 14 inches in height. It's nearly round with a fairly narrow neck and a wide lip. Had it been kicked up by a digging equipment, do you think?
It must have been.
It has a few hairline cracks and it's discolored with age, but it is intact. The style strongly suggests that this is an oil jar and that it dates to the 2nd or 3rd century BCE.
It's that old?
That was my original suspicion, and my suspicion was confirmed when I saw this very faint inscription on the bottom. Are you able to see it?
I see some scratches. They look like a couple of rough boxes and lines.
Well, this is actually Hebrew. These letters here are Mim, Kof, Dalid, Shin.
Makadash, Mekudash? The letters look so strange, and I was sort of an Aramaic school dropout.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. It actually says Mikdash. Do you know what that is?
The Mikdash, is that the holy place? The sanctuary, the ancient temple?
Exactly. This jar must have held oil that was used or was intended to be used in the temple in Jerusalem.
Wait a minute. Could this be the little jar the Maccabees found to light the menorah when they rededicated the temple? The oil that lasted 8 days? Is it magic?
It's a nice thought. But that story about the miracle of the oil was devised several hundred years after the temple's rededication. It was a sort of a cover story. Actually, because the rabbis knew it would be a bad idea to celebrate the Maccabees' victory over Antiochus's empire. After all, they were living under Roman occupation, and the Romans didn't appreciate rebels. So the oil legend became the official reason for celebrating Hanukkah.
It didn't really last for 8 days? Is Hanukkah even 8 days long?
The Maccabees resented that Antiochus had outlawed their favorite holiday, Sukkot, which is 8 days long. So they instituted the new festival to be a reflection of Sukkot. Then they had 2 festivals.
That's amazing. So, what about this jar?
Please put it down, Sarah. This is an extremely precious relic of the Second Temple, which is why I've come today to escort it back to the offices of the Antiquities Authority. The Israel Museum will be finding a way to express the faith's appreciation to you at a later time.
Oh, okay, I guess.
Now, that's something we don't see every day.
Second Temple period oil jar. Beyond consideration.
If you happen to have some old family heirlooms in your attic, you might want to check to see if Antiochus Roadshow is coming to your town.
I'm Mark Wahlberg, live from Modi'in, Israel.
And I'm Coral Pena. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on
Antiochus
Roadshow.